Time's Up. Time's Up is the name of the 2018 movement against sexual harassment that was founded on January 1st of this year by Hollywood celebrities in response to the Weinstein effect and also the Me Too campaign. Yet it's not new, right? It's just an application and an articulation of our collective epistemology that has been in our DNA of Black and brown people since the beginning of time. We've not only said time's up throughout our history, but we've acted in ways that show that when we do, when time is up, we get to moving. Ask Harriet Tubman, ask Sojourner Truth, ask so many others who got out of the boat. As the writer in one of many holy writings is recorded to have said in the book of Ecclesiastes, it notes that there's nothing new under the sun. And in a couple of chapters later, chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, it says this: "For everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." Thus, given this context, I ask two questions. And I'll use the infamous words of the 1982 Paisley Park disciples, Morris Day and the Time. What time is it? Or in the 1987 words of one of my favorite go-go bands, Rare Essence, "Do you know what time it is? Tell me, do you know? Do you know what time it is? Tell me, do you know?" What time is it? For this scholar, it's time up. Time is up on the okie doke. What time is it? It's time for the new. No longer do I want to be, or no longer can I be, a tempered radical. Deborah Meyerson coined the term in 2000, and she stated that a tempered radical is this, and I quote, "Tempered radicals are people who want to succeed in their organization, yet want to live out their values or identities, even if they are somehow at odds with the dominant culture of their organization. Tempered radicals want to fit in and want to retain what makes them different. They want to rock the boat, yet they want to stay in the boat." Now, that was good for a time, but time is up. From my perspective, it's time for a new boat or other means of transport. It's time for a new way of leading. It's time for a new way of being in the world. It's time to step out of the boat, Peter, and be what I am calling a refined revolutionary. When I say refined, I mean refined in as how Webster defines it. Refined meaning with impurities or unwanted elements having been removed by processing. You know, like the refiner's fire, being constantly purified in the fire. Refined as in elegant and cultured in appearance, manner or taste, fine-tuned, urbane. Refined as in developed or improved so as to be precise or subtle, fine-tuned, perfected. And when I say revolutionary, I mean revolutionary as in involving or causing a complete or dramatic change, far-reaching, profound, rebellious, subversive, bold. So Alston, that's me, 2018, that's this year, and you're the first ones to get this one. The refined revolutionary, I'm defining it as one who has survived the processing, become improved, and stepped out of the boat to lead in a bold and subversively profound manner toward a new destiny. Stepping out, going to the new. But being a refined revolutionary is not new either. We've had many models of this way of leadership and being throughout the annals of time. In many ways, we have just become complacent and or comfortable in our own marginalization. In some ways, as Brother Malcolm said, we've been had, we've been took, we've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok. And for some of us, we like it. Just like that. Because they said, when I move, you move just like that. So tonight, I'd like to push us from our comfort zones to the learning, leading edge, to be able to see the expanse of the more of our dreams, the more of our purpose, the more of our lives than just this boat that we've become accustomed to, even yet while some of us complain. Now let me pause right here parenthetically to give recognition and a shout out to my pastor, my soror, my spesh, Reverend Courtney Clayton Jenkins at South Euclid United Church of Christ in Cleveland, as she confirmed this shift for me in a sermon that she preached last August. You hadn't even invited me yet. You see how it all works together? And it was a sermon series entitled Life Beyond the Boat. And on August the 8th, she preached a sermon titled Water Walking. And that thing got me, and it really connected everything that I had been pondering over the last few years. And in the sermon, she stated this: to stay in your boat when there is a call beyond is to handcuff yourself to mediocrity. Oh, you missed your shout right there. To stay in your boat when there is a call beyond is to handcuff yourself to mediocrity. You know, mediocre as in, well, that's the way we've always done it. Mediocre that can render us to becoming indifferent, unexciting, and uninspired. We've been designed for life beyond the run-of-the-mill, life beyond this boat. Thus, attention in my research and thoughts began to exist about being this tempered radical, because that space no longer fit for me. See, it's time to step out of the boat and create your own way. Lead in your own way. Live in your own way. And as Shuri, you know I was going there. Tell Dr. Lasson Billings I went there. As Shuri said to her brother King T'Challa in Black Panther, and I know you've seen it because I've seen it twice and I'll be seeing it again. Well, I'm sorry, but this line is a good one. Just because something doesn't work, just because something works, doesn't mean that it can't be improved. Just because something works doesn't mean that it can't be improved. Wakanda forever. And Wu-Tang forever too. Y'all, Brother Dr. Bonner, we went to lunch and I said, I got to get back because I got to get myself together. I got to get myself in my space. You know, and I do music. And he said, well, you want to go listen to some gospel? I said, no, I'm going to listen to some Wu-Tang before the night. So I had some Wu-Tang and some Chuck Brown. Now I'm all right. Right? I threw in a little Never Could Have Made It on the drive in. I'm all right. For the refined revolutionary, it's not the thing. It's not the thing. It's not the boat that may not be working any longer. It's the me that doesn't work in the boat. Oh, you missed that. It's not the thing. It's not the organization. It's not the relationship. It's not the whatever you're in that doesn't work. It's you who has outgrown that thing. Thus, it's time for transformation and moving into the new and improved, to move into your calling, which is outside of the current boat. So to do this, I suggest to you that there is something from the past that is apropos for walking into our destinies for life, for leadership, and for ultimately social justice. And it is the three-pronged approach, the triumviratical, I like words, triumviratical identities of intellect, authenticity, and responsibility, otherwise known as head, heart, and hands. Now, this head, heart, and hands is based on a Pestalozzian model from the 1800s. And Pestalozzi really is known as the father of modern education. And he believed that education should develop the powers of the head, heart, and hands. He believed that this would help create individuals who are capable of knowing what is right and what is wrong, and acting according to that knowledge. Thus, the well-being of every individual could be improved, and each individual could become a responsible citizen. He believed that empowering and ennobling every individual in this way was the only way to improve society and bring peace and security to the world. Now, don't we need that right about now? Head, heart, and hand. Early 1800s. Then here along comes who? Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, when at age 29 stepped out of the boat. And she began Bethune-Cookman College, now university, with $1.50. $1.50. Firmly committed to social justice, she became a voice of hope and optimism, inspiring pride and self-confidence in others. This three-pronged approach for Bethune's school reflected her beliefs about the role of women at the time in society, morality, and self-reliance. She felt that women should be trained in head, heart, and hand. Their heads to think, their hands to work, and their hearts to have faith. There's a song that's entitled Head, Heart, and Hands that's dedicated to Dr. Bethune, and the refrain of the song says, with your heads, hearts, and hands, with hope and love, head, hearts, and hands, we will rise above, keep the faith no matter what the world demands. Use your head, hearts, and hands. So again, I say time's up. Time is up for what we continue to do. So now let me get you your 3 points of this sermon tonight. We're going to have an altar call. We're going to have an offering, a benediction, and then we're going to get some fried chicken for the repast. I'm just saying. Point number 1, the head. Time is up on thinking and acting as if effective leadership only requires cognitive intelligence. Being book smart as a leader will only get you so far. Notwithstanding all of the emphasis on IQ, I think most people can recall dealing with a person in a leadership position who was a brilliant thinker, a beautiful mind, but had great difficulty understanding how to connect with people. And that's one reason why we can outgrow the boat. After a while, you get tired of butting your heads with that type of leadership, that way of being. Effective leadership requires 3 types of intelligence: cognitive, emotional, and the third one is called a character quotient. Research has shown that an individual with a high IQ could influence others by developing an understanding of how to connect with people on an emotional level versus just using logical reasoning. In other words, the emotional intelligence. Now, Goldman, in all of his work about emotional intelligence, said that it is the capability of individuals to recognize their own emotions and those of others, discern between different feelings, and label them appropriately using emotional information to guide thinking and behavior, and manage and/or adjust emotions to adapt to environments or achieve one's goals. In 2002, a psychologist from Princeton University, and he was also a Nobel Memorial Prize winner in economic sciences, his name was Daniel Kahneman. His research demonstrated something that we already know, that human beings make decisions first for emotional reasons, and then, secondly, for rational reasons. Now, they say this is groundbreaking research, but I just call that common sense. But I know all sense ain't common, and everybody don't have that in their pocketbook. His research solidified the notion that both head and heart are critical components in the skill set of an effective leader. The third type of intelligence that is needed for effective leadership or effective head leadership is what the literature refers to as the character quotient. Now, Dr. King said a lot of stuff, but he did say this about character and the character quotient. He says, we must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character is the true goal of education. So the character quotient represents the strength of your character. While your brain may be valuable to someone else, your beliefs only hold value to you. The character quotient raises the questions of what sum you would command to compromise your beliefs. What you gonna do? What are you willing to give up? Is it money? Is it a promotion? Is it a good pair of shoes? The character quotient is embedded in what James Hillman referred to in his book, The Soul's Code, as the acorn theory. Now, I've had the book, The Soul's Code, probably since 2002. You know, you amass all of these books. And we've got books everywhere in our house because everybody's a professor except for the little white dog. But she's very important. But I've had this book forever, and I read it and I put it down. But something took me right here this time as I was putting together this talk. And as I thought about this character quotient, I began to think about the acorn. And Hillman said this about the acorn. He says, every acorn has within it the blueprint for a mighty and majestic oak tree. But in order for this tiny nut to reach its full potential, it needs to drop down into the dark, into the soil, into the muck. And then it needs to move through all of that with great effort and burst into the light. Well, you and I are that tiny little acorn. Inside of us is the blueprint for a mighty oak, an amazing human with special gifts, with a unique expression, and with a special mission in this world. But we often need the muck of life, the mire of life, the fertilizer of life, the challenges, the hardships, the setbacks, the awful upbringing, the whatevers to reach our fullest potential. So all of this, and I know it all works together because all of this came full circle last week on Ash Wednesday, when Reverend Corey Jenkins preached a sermon, "You Are on the Verge of Greatness." And he talked about the acorn in the mighty oak. And he said, it's an acorn anointing. It's an acorn anointing. So while you may experience pain and growth in the boat as a tempered radical acorn, in order for you to get to your destiny as a refined radical oak tree, you're going to outgrow the boat. You got to put that acorn and plant it someplace else. You've rooted yourself in such a way in the boat that the boat is going to have to keep on moving without you. So what am I saying with all of this? In these times of social injustice, social unrest, those of us who live in the margins, but yet we possess a strong mind, a strong ability to influence people on an emotional level, and a strong positive character, we cannot get to our next personal and professional best by staying in this boat. It's just like standing in an elevator and never pushing the button for the floor you want. The doors are going to open and close, open and close, open and close. But you ain't going nowhere. You won't go anywhere until you select the button for where you want to be lifted. Until that time, nothing is going to happen. Time's up. If you want to see real change, do the transformative work and be real transformational leaders, then you've got to step out of the boat and chart a new path in a new way. We stand on the shoulders of Shirley Anita St. Hill Chisholm, that's a whole name, who stepped out of the boat. Her honesty and convictions were counter to the New York political machine, as well as the U.S. Congress. She refused to accept the status quo. She possessed a charismatic grace that made folk want to follow her. She possessed this three-pronged intellect. She was often quoted as saying, "I breathe fire." And she breathed fire as she breathed truth that was coupled with action. You know, because we'll have 50 million meetings, but we won't do nothing. You got to have action. She created her own space, and ultimately that creation paved the way for Hillary to run for president in 2016 as the Democratic Party's nominee. Let's not forget that Shirley Chisholm was the first Black major party candidate to run for president of the United States in 1972 in that U.S. presidential election, making her also the first woman ever to run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. She moved from tempered radical to refined revolutionary. Point 3, the heart. Brené Brown, in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, says that authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. Another definition of authenticity states that it is an attempt to live one's life according to the needs of one's inner being, rather than the demands of society or one's early conditioning. Authenticity is the degree to which one is true to one's own personality, spirit, or character, despite pressures, external or internal. The heart of leadership, this authenticity, is what moves us to use some of the most basic and important of human values: compassion, trust, empathy, forgiveness, understanding, and love. Whenever I ask my students, let's have a list of definitions of leadership, they always leave out love. Leadership is love. These are values that come from the heart. In an upcoming book chapter that I've written, and the chapter is entitled Standing Outside, and I have out in parentheses, standing outside of the circle, colon, because you have to have a colon. The politics of identity and leadership in the life of a Black lesbian professor. I began musing about this very life-changing and getting out of the boat action. Former First Lady Michelle Obama, in an interview with Oprah 2 years ago, said, "Let me live my life out loud. Don't dial it back. Don't dilute it. Don't apologize for it. It speaks for itself." And this takes me back to my grandma Janie, my mother's mother, who, when we as grandchildren would question stuff or we would laugh at things that, we felt that old people were doing, and as I've gotten older, I'm like, that ain't funny. She would simply just say 2 words: just live. Just live. Or other folks say, keep on living. In other words, that phrase meant that as long as the good Lord blesses you to live, that you're going to have the opportunity to experience all of this and then some. Yet in my more recent and seasoned years, I've connected that phrase to mean that I should just be who I am, who God created me to be authentic. And in this authenticity, I bring it all to the table. Taylor stated this about authenticity: there is a certain way of being human. That is my way. I'm called upon to live my life in this way, and not in imitation of anyone else's. But this gives a new importance of being true to myself. If I'm not, I miss the point of my life. I miss what being human is for me. Being true to myself means being true to my own originality. And that is something only I can articulate and discover. In articulating it, I am also defining myself. I am realizing a potentiality that is properly my own. So whether inside of the circle or outside of the circle, I'm called to be my true self. My identity in authentic leadership from my heart embodies the experiences and social factors that have created and shaped my beliefs. It is in this connection to my soul work, my SOUL work, that causes me to behave and lead in ways that are congruent with my values, my goals, and my beliefs. As Polonius advised his son Laertes in Shakespeare's Hamlet, because I was an English teacher for a good little bit there, he said, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not be false to any man." Thus, stepping out of the boat may become a necessity for survival and also a necessity to thrive. Parker Palmer, one of my favorite writers, said this about the power of authentic leadership. He said that it does indeed reside in the human heart. That is the center for control and life. It is the soul. So leadership for me is soul work. In my life, both professionally and personally, leadership looks like what Bell Hooks calls enactment, enactment, which is the lived practice of interacting in non-dominating ways and sometimes dominating ways, making evident to all observers that we are acting in ways that suggest, for example, care, respect, and affirmation of others. Leadership as soul or heart work in action, because Nikki Giovanni said the purpose of any leadership is to build more leadership. This looks like this new generation of folk who've stepped up and stepped out of the boat and said, time's up because Black Lives Matter. They said, time's up because Me Too. They said, time's up because Black scholars matter, Latinx scholars matter, Indigenous scholars matter. The authenticity in leadership from the heart is in the form of refined revolutionary Dr. Michael Sorrell, the president of Paul Quinn College, right up 45. He's doing the college presidency in a different way, in a different boat. He's considered one of the most innovative college presidents in this 21st century. He has a transformative heart leader change the school's football field into a working farm. And he's restructured that school, increasing enrollment and graduation rates. His out-of-the-boat leadership is, as he states, a belief that the needs of the community supersede the individual. So the new mantra at Paul Quinn is, we over me. Time's up. Time is up. Point 3, the hands. Responsibility. The hands represent an ethic of responsibility, otherwise known as to whom much is given, much is required. Come on now. Notice that in that gospel, St. Luke didn't delineate on the whom. So it's whomever. No matter what your state, no matter what your circumstance, no matter your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, no matter what. To whom much is given, much is required. German sociologist and political economist Max Weber noted that an ethic of responsibility acknowledges value obligations, but assumes the absence of any given hierarchy of values and the inevitability of value conflict as the context for moral endeavor. It's going to be some trouble, but you have to make a decision. For me, an ethic of responsibility requires that if one is placed in a position of power, a position of leadership, in whatever form, then one has the responsibility to do the work, the leadership of the hand. One has the responsibility to challenge the process or the status quo, i.e., ask the questions. Excuse me, where's this boat going? How long is it going to take to get there? We good for that? How long? Where you at? Why are you doing that? But you got to ask the questions. Do I need to stay in this boat or do I need to get out? That aligns with Weber's notion of social action as overt. It's intentional, right? He's intentional. You know what I'm saying? Intentional, deliberate action as well as the converse, the failure to act and passively acquiesce also gives you some results you may not want. In leadership, we are called to action. In this life, the work for me as a practitioner and a professor of leadership is my responsibility to speak, to lead, and to teach with authenticity. To whom much is given, pressing to accomplish and see through what my first doctoral student, whose dissertation I chaired at the University of Houston in 1999, Dr. Kenya Ayers, said in her 2000 book, and this is how I know this is my baby, because this title is on point. The book is entitled To Whom Much is Given, the definitive guide to demystifying the doctoral experience for women. And she identifies what she calls the unclouded lens of my own potential. This unclouded lens compels me to enact, to speak loudly, and to get out of the boat. Yet I must confess, because confession is good for the soul, right? That as an academic, as a woman, as a lesbian, as a black person in America, as a black person in the world, I get tired of always having to tell the story from my perspective. I get tired of that story, of that lens being brushed off or being used as a broad stroke. They say, well, all of them are like that. We are not a monolithic people, period, in whatever group you're in. Yet, I have a story to tell. And that I know if I tell it, it may just free somebody else to tell their story. It may free somebody else to step up and step out of the boat. So telling the story is a part of getting out of the boat, being released from what has kept us bound so long. As Brother Dr. T. Elon Dancy said in a recent Facebook post, we will not be rewarded by the same systems we are trying to subvert. So thus it is our responsibility to make a new system and get out before we go deeper into the sunken place. It is, as Reverend Dr. Rosalind Nichols said recently in a talk last week at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, she said, it's time to invest in our own salvation. This is our responsibility. This is the work of our own hands. You know, you're doing the work and taking responsibility is much like when you order something from Amazon and the box arrives. I know a little something about this because I think there's some boxes at my house right now, and I'm probably going to have to answer for that when I get home because there's always boxes coming. But you open the box, you remove your items. Then you notice there's a little small piece of paper, sometimes a different color from anything else in the box, that has printed on this, packed by so-and-so. Why is this piece of paper in the box? Because the company is telling the workers that it is their responsibility to pack the box, yes, but they are also going to be held accountable for that box. Is everything in the box? Were the fragile items packed properly and securely for safe arrival? Now, my wife loves to return things. I mean, you know, we had this floor cleaner. It stopped working. It was 3 years later. She said, you should just take it back to the store. I said, it's 3 years old. You cannot just take it back to the store. At least I'm not going to take it back to the store. I'll just buy you a new one. But she emailed customer service at Amazon because, right, something had arrived broken. They responded with a refund. But here's the kicker. She also received an email from the packer apologizing, taking responsibility for not packing the item in such a way as to withstand whatever UPS or FedEx had to dish out. The packer did the work and took responsibility. Time's up for the same old, same old. Be a leader who does the work and takes the responsibility when things go awry. When it's good, yay. When it's bad, I did it. So what does all of this mean in this present moment? Like Michael Jackson said, it's time for us to make a change. We need to look at that person in the mirror, honestly at ourselves to make a change. But I like the way the prophet James Brown said in his song, It's a New Day. See, I believe in James Brown, Jesus, and James Cleveland. And Wu-Tang. The song, It's a New Day, he said, don't let nobody take care of your business better than you do. Handle your own. Time's up. Time's up on settling for just what we as we can see as leaders, sitting in the same spaces and hoping for change. There is more. It's time for truth-telling in action. As a young child, I love game shows. I still do. I watch Jeopardy every night, and I'll tape it, and if I miss it, I'm cross. I'm being kind. I'm just not a nice person. But I love the show To Tell the Truth. And that show featured a panel of 4 celebrities whose objective was to guess or correctly identify the person that was on the show that night. They had some kind of unusual occupation or experience. So there were 3 contestants. 2 were imposters, and the third one was the real person. And the thing about it was that the imposters could lie, but the real person had to tell the truth. Truth-telling is hard, particularly in times of great stress. But I always have to go back to what my mother said, go ahead and tell the truth, because if you lie, it's going to be worse. And then you're going to lie on top of that, and you know you can't remember from one moment to the next what you said. So just go and tell the truth and take it. It is in the context of practitioner and professor of leadership that I write and I speak, grounded in Foucault's work on the Greek concept of parrhesia. Now, I went to seminary a couple years ago, and I took the Greek class, and my wife said, I don't know why you're taking Greek. I said, I want the challenge. I don't know why. I just wanted the challenge. But parrhesia, which literally means all telling, but it implies not only freedom of speech, but the obligation to speak the truth for the common good, even at personal risk, fearless speech. For Foucault, the central question was, and for us it still is, what is the importance for the individual and for society of telling the truth, of knowing the truth, of having people who tell the truth, as well as how to recognize those folks? And I'll add this. It's not only about speaking the truth, but how do you walk it out? Walking it out may mean that you start water walking, that you get out of the boat and go on to the next. I willingly take this mantle of truth-telling in the context of living, leading, and loving the work. For me, the living, leading, and loving is my soul work that I do as an educator, as a leader, and as a preacher. And it can only be done in this parrhesiatic voice that is grounded in care, justice, and responsibility. In other words, it's grounded in head, heart, and hand. We are only because so many others came before us. A refined revolutionary from the 20th century, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, said it this way: we today stand on the shoulders of our predecessors who've gone before us. We, as their successors, must catch the torch of freedom and liberty passed on to us by our ancestors. We cannot lose in this battle. We, the successors, should be dedicated to making sure that those who follow will be educated, cared for, treated fairly, and yes, loved, as to continue to pass it on and work to become examples of refined revolutionaries. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey, thank you. Questions, I guess. Any questions?
Hello. Okay. Does anyone have any? Oh, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Sora.
Question. Oh, okay.
So it's less of a question, I guess, and more of a hi.
Hi.
Sorry. Maybe I'm being recorded. Okay. But less of a question, more, I guess, of a comment. As I'm reflecting on what you said, I'm thinking about the different roles that people will play in response to, like your analogy, stepping out of the boat, but also seeing the benefit of people who are working in the system to try and make changes and to at least begin the transformation with people. I was recently listening to a podcast where they were interviewing President Obama when he was a community organizer, and said that every problem that he tried to fix led him to a politician that had to solve it. And so he was like, well, I need to be that in order to solve the problem. So just kind of comment on how you view your tempered, radical and revolutionary in terms of being outside the system and inside the system.
Great question. Great question. Actually, and I thought about that. I think it's in some ways it's about keeping your foot in two places, but at some point then you're going to have to make a choice. I don't suggest that being a refined revolutionary is for everybody. Everybody's road is different. Everybody's destiny is different. And so for some people, being that tempered radical really does work. I mean, it's powerful because you can stay in that system and you're needed in that space for others to be able to see that some things can be done. And so that may be your purpose in life. But for others of us, it is, okay, I've done that. And now there's something else that's brewing. And so I'm stepping out. But you have to make sure that you keep your connections with those who are still in those spaces. So it's really about community. It's about connections. It's about relationship. I often talk about leadership as relationship. If there's no relationship, there's no real leadership happening. So it's having those relationships across. And so not taking the boat to an island by myself. Because if you by yourself, you're not a leader. Because you're only a leader if somebody's following you. So.
Oh, sorry.
My former colleague from the University of Houston, Dr. Hermond.
Yes, hi, Dr. Alston. I was just about to tell you my name and say we've never met before. But
No, we're not doing that.
yes, I was thinking through this whole idea of being refined. And so the question is it possible that contextually there might be times when you can't be a revolutionary and be refined, that the context is such that for you to change the system, you actually have to be an SOB?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. Because the refined revolutionary is growing into a place of grace. And sometimes grace don't fit the situation because you've been graceful for so long with the folks. And the only thing they understand is when you come out of yourself. So you have to be able to figure out how do you balance that as to not lose the respect of the others. So it's all about knowing the context, knowing when. My mom always said, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So knowing how to say and when to say, because it may be that you just have to pull somebody aside, do the whisper in the ear with a smile on your face, and then go back. But yeah, there are times that you have to go step in that camp and deal with it like that.
Can you ask my question for me?
Sure. What's your question?
My question is, if you want to step outside of the boat, but you have so much hesitation and different doubts and not enough support, does it mean that it's not your time and it's not your season right now, or is it that you're not built for stepping outside the boat?
Okay, so her question is, if you want to step out the boat, but you don't have the kind of support that you might need right now, does that mean it's not your season or you shouldn't step out of the boat?
Or does it mean you're just not built for it?
Or does it mean you're not built for it?
Well, you're always built. You're built for it. You're built for it. But it is also about having experiences in life and growing to get to that space where you are confident enough to step out. It just may not be the season. Just like when I said about this, I've had this idea for Refined Revolutionary for some time, but it wasn't the season for it. I knew it wouldn't. I couldn't do it justice. So it's about having some life experiences, going through some stuff, going through the muck, going through the mire, going through the refining to get to. So when you get there, you really do, in the church, we say you really do have a testimony. You really do have something to say and a way to lead that will be unmatched. There's a question over here.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Hello, my question is, do you think people in the older generation stepped out the boat more than the people like in my generations and the newer generations to come?
No.
No?
I don't. And here's the deal. We just didn't get the stories. I mean, we got some of the stories. We got some of the history about who stepped out of the boat in books. But, for us, a lot of it is an oral tradition. And so it's the stories that we've heard in our families, the stories that you heard at the family reunion or sitting around at Thanksgiving or Christmas, that you learn about our hidden figures in our own families. And so the stories just weren't, we have a list of people that we can say, oh, Dr. King, Sojourner Truth, but there are a lot of other hidden figures. We are living in a time now where we can take this thing right here and go, bam, there you go. And that started with the Vietnam War. Really, when we were able to see on TV what was happening. And so it's just now that it's much more instantaneous. I think that young folks today are just as bold, if not bolder in some ways, than what we've seen before. So take heart and keep on, because at some point, some of us in this room want to retire. I saw my retirement people the other day. I'm not playing. I'm going to the beach. Questions.
So, first of all, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
I enjoyed the presentation. And your presentation tonight kind of cleared some things for me as a pastor and as a minister. My question to you is, because of the informational age that we have now, do you think that more so now people will become more refined quicker than they were in olden days when they didn't have access to the information that they have now? And I'm asking that because I feel that the temperate radical and the refined revolutionary terms can be used in any set of life, just not just in teaching.
Absolutely.
And so when I look at leadership, I have this thing about studying to make sure that whoever is a parishioner at my church learns something. I don't just come there talking about something I heard from somebody else.
Exactly.
And so my question is, with this information age, can we become refined revolutionaries quicker than those who were in our past?
No, I don't think so. Because you can try to have that virtual experience. You can read about it, but until it happens in your life, and I think that is that is a maturation process that takes time. And it is whether or not you are in a situation that will grow you in a particular way. And that, for some people, they may have those experiences when let's say they're in their 20s. But it's just the seed that's being planted. The acorn is just planting. It has to grow. And it's grown based on experiences across time. And so I think it can't be, put some water on me and I sprout all quick. It doesn't, I don't think it works that way. I still think that there needs to be time for that processing. Because, the thing about refinery and refining things is that when you get the raw material, its value, it's not valuable in that state, right? So when you dig up coal and things like that, it's not valued until it has gone through a long period of processing. Then it becomes valuable after that. And so that does take time. So.
What about what you're saying in your research and your talk in terms of a message for doctoral students, particularly those in the dissertation phase?
I think the message is take your time in the process. Don't try to, like I said, sprinkle water and it's going to happen overnight. It just doesn't work that way. It's not worth it. And the work that you do will be shoddy. You have to go through. You really do have to go through. And I mean, you know what the end is going to be, but you need to take time to enjoy the process, the ups and downs of the process, because the end won't mean as much until you've connected it back to those times when it was the lowest in the process. When you really, that real refining, the easy breezy part, you're like, oh yeah. But when you have your comps and you're like, this question, I don't know what they're talking about. Who wrote this? Am I still supposed to be in this program? Ask all those questions, to yourself. But know that you're here for a reason. But take the time to experience all of the good and the bad of that process. Yeah. My friend.
Howdy.
Hey.
Yes. I was in such a rush, Donna Drury, Texas A&M University. I was in such a rush today to come and hear General Judy. That's my new name for her. That I did something I haven't done in probably 10, 15, 20 years. I locked my keys in the car.
Oh, Lord.
So I had to, with it running, so the electric start, I was putting my backpack in, shut the door, and went, where my keys? So it cuts off after a while. It was all right. My husband came and brought my keys, but I got on the road highway. I was coming to hear you.
Glad to see you again.
So my question is this, though. You said something about being able to get out of the boat. And all of us here got a test and a testimony, and the very reason we're here, but we've left some people on the boat, right? So what do we do for the people that's still on the boat? We want to reach back and help them, but, so how do we handle the people we left on the boat?
Now, here's my authentic answer. Yes, I like that. Everybody can't go. Everybody's not meant to go. They talk about season, reason, lifetime. Everybody, because when I'm reaching back, you need to be reaching forward. So again, it's the relationship of the two hands coming together. I'm not going to just reach back and just kind of drag you all the time. Yeah, we do that with some people, but after a while, that gets tiring, and that slows your process. So for some people are going to get left in the boat, and that might be what their purpose is. But you have to consider self and what your purpose is, connecting to who am I? This is a question I ask doctoral students all the time in leadership. Who are you? And do you know? Because if you don't, then we have a problem. Because you really need to know who you are and what you're made of and what you're going to deal with and what you're going to take and what you're not going to take and how you are going to dig in and get through this process. And once you know that, then you'll be able to deal with some other things. And at that point, you'll be able to say, not today. Can't deal with that today, not tomorrow either. Next 3 years, I'm not with you. Hallelujah. Yeah, I do love you.
My question is, in lieu of what's going on right now in South Florida and those young people, and you talk about leadership coming from the soul, I would like to know, where would you place those young people in terms of radical, or are they refined, or because their actions has caused them to come out?
Yeah.
So I would like to hear what you
That's
call those young people.
That's a good question. I think they are on that continuum. There's somewhere in between, and I don't know what that in between looks like yet, because their life experiences are not such that they can go all the way to the end as the refined revolutionary, but they're being sparked in such a way that they are beginning to ask the questions and they're beginning to walk it out. You know, they are really, it's like, I'm not taking this. I'm lying down in the street. I'm walking on the water. I'm trying. I'm keeping my eyes on it. Because I see something wrong. And that is the key, that we can get young people at that age to begin to question. You know, when I was younger, don't ask grown folks no question. Why not? If you want to know something, be respectful, but given the context of where we are now and what's happening, there has to be a demand, and it can't come from up here. It has to come from the whole village, if you will. And to have the children lead, I mean, that's always been the case. The Bible says that. The children led in the 60s, right? If it were not for the children, we might not be here. So I think they're on that continuum somewhere. And as I begin to continue to work through this, at some point, the revelation will occur. It'll be 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll wake up and I'll be like, that's what I'm going to call it. So do you think they were forced out of the boat? I don't know if they're forced. I think that they are a different breed in such that they just think very differently than we did. And they have different expectations. And so their expectations are, why isn't it happening right now? Wherein, in earlier generations, that might have been the question in our back of our heads, but we knew we had to work through some other things. But they are instant gratification. Answer my question now. Why you need to change the law today? I need y'all to look at, Schoolhouse Rock, because it takes a while to change the bill, But I just think, and the system is not designed for their way of being, their way of thinking. The system is, because the system wants to keep its own in the way that it's been. So, Tammy had a question.
Thank you, Dr. Alston, for coming and blessing us with this word.
Oh, thank you.
For us doc students and career folks, when we feel that imposter syndrome, what do we do?
Yeah. I struggle with that because I don't even know why. Where does that come from for us? Because for those of us who are believers, know that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. So you're not an imposter in any way, shape, or form. Although I guess the system, again, has told you that you are less than. But you have to go back to self, and you have to figure out a way to find something to stand sure-footed upon in this process, to say that I know that I know that I know what I'm talking about. The thing is, this whole system of education was never designed for none of us in this room. It wasn't designed for us. And the fact that we have thrived in it for centuries is perplexing to many. So if you look at your history and see that you've survived, then why are you an imposter? You're not. So you're going to have to look at yourself in the mirror every day and say, I'm grown and I got this. I'm grown and I got this. Until you convince yourself that you're grown and you got this. You know, it's a degree that you don't have to have the degree. You've chosen to get the degree. The institution has chosen to partner with you through the process. So you should be here. And so that's the thing you have to, it's a mindset. I forgot who wrote that book, Mindset, years ago. But it's a mindset that you really have to talk yourself through that. And when you can't talk yourself through it, you need a cadre of people where y'all get together, whoever that is, race mentoring or whatever it is, and talk each other through that, because it's about relationship too. Because this is the case of, in this context, as a doc student, when I'm putting my hand back, the other doc students are reaching forward.
I just want to say I really enjoy you and always enjoy you.
Thank you.
When you come in here, you made me think, you made all of us think here. And just tying it back to resilience up here, you know, my summary is finding joy. What you're telling us in here, hey, once you step out of that boat there, you can find joy. How
Yes, you can.
Find that joy by serving humanity.
Because ultimately, I'm not serving humanity,
You're serving yourself also.
but I'm ultimately serving for me, God. And I recognize the God in me. And so it's not just the relationship outside, it's also the relationship in here and the relationship here, right? And so I find joy because I know what my purpose is, because I know Judy. No, it doesn't all have to be all bad. Sometimes I'm just the boat. For me, getting out of the boat, I'm like, I've been there, done that. So let me do, I want to make sure that I'm still being useful and used properly, rather than letting my gifts go in this boat. Because after, for some things, it's like, yeah, okay, I've been there, done that. It doesn't fill me up anymore. And we're not being filled up anymore, wherever that is, it's time to go. It's time to leave. So, you had a question.
Thank you, Dr. Alston. Question. In building on that theme, thank you for resilience and stepping out of the boat to take the lead. It doesn't necessarily have to be a one-time stepping out of the boat.
No.
Right?
Right.
It could be one time for you and
Yes.
minute for another.
Exactly. It's like Maslow's hierarchy, right? We always talk about, I want to be self-actualized. I just want to get to the point of being self-actualized. You mean to tell me in your whole life you've been self-actualized one time? You got a sad life. It's a process of, depending on what the situation is, depending on the relationship, depending on the organization, but depending on your position, that you may be stepping in and out. It's all depending, it's all situational and necessary, because we can't just step out all the time. There are times, because the other part about the stepping out is that at points, you need to be poured into. You need to be renewed as a leader. And so that means that while you stepped out, there's sometimes you need to step back and then get your feel, get your energy again. It's like when birds fly south and you got the lead bird, and that lead bird for a while flies and leads, and then they go to the back and somebody else steps up because they know they got that relationship, but they know where they're going. Yes. Yeah. Because it's all about relationship. You got to know when to say when to do when, all that.
So that kind of goes back to your, which we all know that you're not a leader, that's someone's following.
Exactly.
You have to meet them where they are, get the where you're trying to go.
Right. Or leave them there. I believe in leaving you there. I'm not going to argue with you, but so long. Because that makes you tired. And I got other things to do.
You gonna take up the offering?
So, yeah, we ready for the offering?
Are there any more questions?
You know, I always
one-
got
one more?
Because
One more?
my musician just raised his hand. Don't play. The maestro.
Dr. Judy, thank you so much for this wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
I want you to give us your, I guess, your insight, your suggestions on how we can leave well. And especially, I'm speaking specifically from those of us who work in church spaces.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes the revolutionary work that we do causes us to be thrown out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And very often we don't have the opportunity to say goodbye or create an opportunity for us to say goodbye in a way that if we need to come back, we can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how can we learn to leave well?
Yeah. You know, Mom would say, don't burn no bridges. However, there are some bridges that need to be burned because there are some places that we don't need to go back to. So what you do in leaving well in that instance is it's because folks that you leave there may end up leaving at some point too. And they still have they will rekindle the relationship with you in the next space. So therefore you have to take the high road, if you will. Don't just pack up your purse and like, I'm out, kicking over the pews. And you have to be humble, I guess, which is hard when you're pissed off, right? I always say that, and I tease, but this is true. It can't be a pastor because church people get on my last nerves, right? Come on now. Get on that thing. As a plus they get on your last, but we're all human because I get on somebody's last nerve too. But we have to be humble because we are in that leadership position. And people will look at you for good or for not. It is what it is. We're out there. Because I've been in that situation before. It's like, okay, well, you can't come here no more. All right, well, God bless you. And then I go home and I get the baseball bat and I beat the mattress till I'm tired. But it is about that saving face, if you will. You have to leave well. That doesn't mean that you tuck your tail and run. You hold your head up. You say, thank you very much. And you go on about your business. Because at some point, somebody's going to come back around and require your services again. And at that point, then you have the option to say yes or say no. But you always have to figure out a way to leave well. Because that reputation will go with you if you don't.
A church in Madison, Wisconsin. And what I discovered was that what you have to realize is that a church is a hospital.
Yes, it is.
You are working with sick people.
Yes.
In the building.
Everybody.
And so you can't sort of personalize the responses you get from people.
Right.
Because they are hurting.
Right.
I remember when I started the ministry, I was so excited. It was like, oh, I've been delivered, I'm doing this, all of that, right? And I think the scripture that I used was, above all things, I wish the congregation to be prosperous in all things. Yeah. Well, then I learned that wasn't the right one for them. I had to go back over to, do you want to be healed?
Yeah. Right.
Do you want to step into the water to be healed? Yeah. And some people don't want to be healed.
Exactly. And those are the ones, you leave them where you find them.
You leave them over there.
But you're right, it is a hospital in many ways. And so the key is to be in that space and not to let that stuff jump off on you. Get your vaccination, get your whatever you need to get, so that when you sit down in whomever's seat, you don't get what sickness they have, because then that's when we become jaded in those places, and then that's what permeates the entire organization, the congregation, whatever it is, and then the culture changes, and the climate changes. And now you might be able to change a climate in a year or two, but it takes forever and a day to change the culture. The baskets will be at the door as you're leaving. Thank you so much. Thank you.